Guys, it is finally here. We have some breaking news. The Social Security Administration has just unveiled the new cost of living adjustment for Americans. And if you want to know more information about Social Security or the stimulus checks and when you should expect to receive them, then continue watching this video because the whole goal of this channel is to provide you with the most up-to-date, reliable stimulus check information. I always do my very best to provide you guys with the most up-to-date and reliable stimulus check information. So, be sure to continue watching this video to stay up to date on the most important stimulus news. So the Social Security Administration has actually released and announced an annual cost of living adjustment of 8.7% amid a rising inflation rate, everybody, that has been punishing for Americans on fixed income. Now, the adjustment represents the largest one-time increase since 1981 and the largest increase ever experienced by beneficiaries alive today. The increase took effect this year was 5.9%, and the increase will begin with benefits payable to more than 65 million Social Security beneficiaries in January. The increased payments to more than 70 million supplemental security income beneficiaries is now set to begin December 30th. Now, thanks to unusual benefits, Social Security beneficiaries can expect to realize the full cost of living adjustment increase. In previous years, the annual adjustment was eaten up by increases in the cost of Medicare Part B, the unit of Medicare that pays for doctors and hospital outpatient services. The Social Security Administration Commissioner has said that Medicare premiums are going down and Social Security benefits are going up, which will give seniors more peace of mind and breathing room. This year's substantial Social Security cost of living adjustment is the first time in over a decade that Medicare premiums are not rising, and shows that we can provide more support to older Americans who count on the benefits that they have earned. And everybody, the annual adjustment is calculated by averaging inflation readings among urban wage earners and clerical workers folks from July, August, and September. And so now, annual inflation readings in those months came in at approximately 8.5% to 8.2%. Despite the expected increase, the methodology the IRS uses to calculate the annual adjustment for Social Security can actually still leave most people financially vulnerable. And according to Mary Johnson, the policy analyst and editor at the Senior Citizens League, that's because the strategy puts way too much emphasis on gas and transportation costs. Those are items that retirees spend less money on compared with food, healthcare, and housing. So now Mary Johnson has estimated that the average retiree benefit of around $1,656 per month is short, about $43 per month on average, and by a total of $417 year to date. And given recent inflation data for 2022, the year-on-year inflation rate among urban wage earners and clerical workers has averaged 9%. The Minnesota governor is also pushing lawmakers to pass huge rebate checks instead of a gas tax holiday, as inflation surges to levels not seen in 40 years. Governor Walz's proposal calls for direct payments of $500 to adults who make less than $164,000 a year, and $1,000 per couple. He has tripled the size of the checks since he first proposed them in January, and his administration now estimates the cost at $2 billion. The checks are part of Walz's updated spending plan. Politicians across the country are grappling with inflation, especially highly visible gas prices, with this fall's midterm elections looming. Walz said in a direct payment that would be more effective than waiving the state's 28-cent per gallon tax over the summer, as House Democrats have proposed that. Now, Walz also told reporters it's quite a few pull-ups that you can get $1,000 from me. I think this money is in the hands of folks who will make a good difference and is fiscally responsible. Under a gas tax holiday, relief would be much lower than with a one-time payment. Republicans who control the Minnesota Senate call a gas tax holiday a gimmick. With the 2022 session nearing its midpoint, lawmakers in the state have stalled on proposals to spend $1 billion with a combined budget surplus and federal crisis relief money. Republican and Democratic lawmakers have dealt with split-party control in the legislature since 2019. In recent days, Democrats have accused Senate Republicans of not wanting deals in hopes of improving their hand in the fall's midterms.
In addition to taking action today to restrict two particularly egregious types of banking fees, my administration has pushed banks to reduce the fees they charge for consumers across the board. The result? 15 of the nation's 20 largest banks are voluntarily getting rid of bounty tax charges entirely. We're going forward with the director's team is also developing rules for guidance that would require banks to go even further in addressing additional types of junk fees. We're working to lower prices and increase competition across the whole economy. Because when companies compete, products get better, prices go down. encourage innovation in America. And America leads the world. It's called capitalism. I've said it before, capitalism without competition isn't capitalism. It's exploitation. Folks, there are two very different ways of looking at our country. One is, as I've said before, the view from Park Avenue, which says help the wealthy and maybe that will trickle down to everyone in the country. The other is from Scranton or Claymont or thousands of cities across the country, like the place I grew up. The benefit and the belief that the backbone of America are people who get up every morning and work for a living, put on their shoes, get out of bed and go to work. The middle class, they're the ones who built this country. That's who our country should work for. We're going to keep taking concrete actions like this. You're going to hear more from me on this to make sure it does. And when it
Now folks, the IRS has just released some shocking news on the upcoming relief checks. It's confirmed that some Americans will have to wait longer than others to receive their relief money. And President Biden is meeting with Democrats to create a new action plan that would actually address inflation. And now millions of taxpayers have already been waiting 4 or 5 months for their federal income tax returns after completing 1040 paper returns and putting those returns in the mail in late January or February. No money's in sight in late June, and frankly everybody, the wait will take longer. The IRS has essentially been unable to process the paper 1040 returns that individuals filed in 2022 until it's finished processing the pile-up paperwork, which was filed in 2021. It's a first in, first out process for paper returns, and if the IRS is not done with processing paper 1040 returns filed by individuals in 2021, it cannot move on paper returns filed so this year. This week, the IRS said the agency will hit a milestone of all sorts and be done processing all of the originally filed Form 1040 paper returns without errors that it received in 2021. As of June 10th, the IRS has processed more than 4.5 million out of a total of more than 4.7 million individual taxpayer returns received in 2021. It's an important step that will enable the IRS to move on to work on the 1040 individual paper returns filed in 2022. You cannot get a refund if the IRS doesn't process the return. Unfortunately, many taxpayers have absolutely no idea that the IRS is buried in this much paperwork. The accumulation of paper returns has been a troublesome development since the crisis shutdown shook up the system. While some progress has been made, it's not enough to get the job done. About 8 million federal returns filed by paper will be mailed to the IRS so far this year. More will arrive as some taxpayers who requested extensions also will file by paper. The IRS maintains that it's critical for those who still need to file a tax return this year to file electronically. If possible, by year end, the IRS projects that it can start the next tax season in 2023 without a paperwork backlog. The IRS had a backlog of 20 million unprocessed paper tax returns by the end of May, an increase of 1.3 million over the same time last year. During 2021, the report noted that the IRS received about 17 million paper individual income tax returns and about 21 million paper business tax returns. Paper returns take longer than electronically filed returns, even if there are no mistakes or issues. Before the crisis, someone who filed a return by paper might have to wait 4 to 6 weeks for a refund. Many taxpayers who filed paper returns in 2021 got caught in the backlog and reported waiting 6 months and longer to receive the refunds. The IRS acknowledged and said, to date, more than twice as many returns await processing compared to a typical year at this point in the calendar year. Recently, everybody, 3 top advisors to President Biden attended a meeting with Democratic lawmakers with the focus on the economy. Instead of managing an economy in the midst of a natural rotation away from recovery and into a stable period of growth, officials are analyzing and modeling worst-case scenarios, like what the shocking gas prices will be, hitting $200 per barrel, and what it means for the economy. Soaring prices, low poll numbers, and majorities that appear to be on the brink have created no shortage of reasons for unease.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Peters, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been listening for a while, and it strikes me as the one thing we've learned from the debt ceiling discussion is that the debt ceiling is not the answer. Whatever the problem is, the existence of the debt ceiling is not keeping us from being $30 trillion in debt. And the reason is because it's the real analogy. It's not some warning light. It's the credit card bill. You've already spent that money. You, your family, your spouse, your kids, they already rang up that account. And the only responsible thing to do is to pay the bill. And by the time you get to the bill, it's too late to talk about the spending. Let's face facts that the debt ceiling has become a political cudgel rather than some sort of useful policy tool So those of us who are worried about debt and deficit shouldn't just talk about whether this is good or bad. It's